All right, so hello again, everyone. Charles Banfield here with another Karate Canucks conversation. And this time, it's my pleasure to be joined by Sensei Chris Taneda. And Sensei Taneda began his martial arts journey in 1974, training in Chito-Ryu Karate-Do under the guidance of Sensei Warren Mauer. And Sensei Mauer was a student of Sensei David Akutagawa, who at the time was a senior student of O Sensei Masamai Tsuruoka, who's also universally known as the father of Canadian karate. Fast forward to 1979, Sensei Taneda would align himself with Sensei Akutagawa, who chose to maintain his affiliation with O Sensei Chitose, who's the founder of Chito-Ryu Karate, after Tsuroka Sensei left O Sensei Chitose's organization. And in the years that have followed since then, Sensei Taneda has maintained this close affiliation with the Chitose family. And even for several years, he was even entrusted with the care and development of Soke Chitose's son, Naoyuki, who will become the third generation Soke of Chito-Ryu. Sensei Taneda currently holds a 7th degree black belt in Chito-Ryu Karate. It's a rank that's also recognized by Karate Canada, and as well as holding the teaching title of Kyoshi. And throughout his martial arts career, he's accumulated several awards and accolades, including but not limited to the following. So he's a 2-time Karate British Columbia open weight champion. And I believe your son Matthew also is an open weight champion as well. So I think this is a unique achievement, father and son having done that. You're also 6-time Canadian National Kumite champion, also Canadian National Kata champion in the Masters division. Placed 5th at the 1990 WKF World Championships in Mexico City. 1997 British Columbia Karate Athlete of the Year, 1998 Soke Cup champion. For those who don't know, Soke Cup is the Chito-Ryu World Championships. 2007 Soke Cup Dojo champion, where Sensei Taneda's students won 5 out of 6 divisions at the World Championships. In 2010 was one of the torchbearers for the Vancouver Winter Olympic Games. And in 2012, received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, which honors significant contributions and achievements of select Canadian citizens. So along with these accolades, he's also acquired a number of additional roles and responsibilities, and which always seems to happen when you're successful at something. So he's also a member of Karate British Columbia's technical committee, a member of Karate Canada's Dan grading panel, a member of the grading board for the International Chito-Ryu Karate Federation, which involves sitting on grading panels in Japan, Hong Kong, and Canada. And in 2019 was the host of the Soke Cup, which took place in Penticton, British Columbia. And on top of all of this, Sensei Taneda and his wife Cheryl, who's also a 3rd degree black belt, own and operate 4 locations of the Taneda Karate Dojo in southern British Columbia's Okanagan Valley area. And that has one dojo each in Kelowna, West Kelowna, Summerland, and Penticton. So with all that said, welcome, Sensei Taneda. It's a pleasure to finally have you as a guest on this podcast. I've been hoping to get you on here for a while, so I'm glad to finally be successful in that endeavor.
Well, thank you, Charles. I really appreciate you inviting me. I hope that I can give some input to your audience, and yeah, hope we have some fun today.
I'm sure we will. I'll find it interesting. I don't know about anybody else, but this is a selfish endeavor. So, and if others find value in it, I'm happy to share. So. So usually how these things begin is I'll start with some, general background questions about your general background. So including where you're from and what prompted you to start your journey, martial arts journey.
It's interesting because when I was in high school, one of my friends, he was an orange belt in a club in Kelowna, and he invited us down to a class, and that's sort of where it started. He did a little bit of an introductory in the school, and always interested in martial arts, always obviously having the background. And as I went further along, I found more about my own history, like my family history, right? So, my grandfather, he moved to here and he started at the judo club in Kelowna. And he was, I believe he was one of the two. He was either a Yondan in Kendo and a Nidan in judo, or the other way around. Yeah, so he was heavily involved that way. My father ended up meeting my mother because of that. Interesting story is that my grandfather from my mother's side was a Christian minister. He traveled to Canada to minister. And when they came over, one of the places he was brought to was Kelowna, and one of the elders from the Japanese United Church was my other grandfather. So that's how my parents met. And in that meeting, it's evolved into all kinds of things. But when we first started up the dojo, eventually when I'm, early 20s, that it started out at the Japanese United Church. They had built a church, and that's where we started up the dojo when we started. So yeah, that's some of it. I was born and raised in Kelowna. I should say I was born in Kelowna, raised in West Bank, but even my father was born in West Bank, so we've been here a long time. Our family has been here a long time. And what's happened is that I went back to Japan, but the generation of my mother and father, they didn't go back to Japan. So I went back there and sort of looked into the roots. And yeah, interesting that's its own story, the roots of our family. Like on my grandfather's side, they come from southern in Kagoshima. So in that area is the Satsuma group and the Shimazu Clan, which are really, if you watch The Last Samurai, that's that group. So so there's a real interesting history there. And while I'm talking that history, I went back there, and one of my students lives in Japan, and his wife used to work with someone that lived in Kagoshima. So when we went down there, the other employee was going to meet us there. So she said, "Oh, I'm part of the Shimazu group, and our family was involved." And I didn't say much, but I was going back to try to find it. So we went to this one museum, and they went through some records. "Oh, sorry, you can't find the name here." And then they went in the back, and they go, "Oh, come, we found your grandfather's where the name started in." And what happens is in the Japanese system, sometimes males will take on the female's name because they don't have anyone to carry on their name. So and we're talking back in, I don't know, it's back lots of generations. The lady that was with us, when their name showed up on the genealogy chart, is exactly the same place where my grandfather's name showed up. So it's like their ancestors. So we are probably related, and straight off of that, from that Shimazu group. So yeah, so I know I'm going off on a side trip here, but if you go back to the Okinawa, and Okinawa being sort of taken over by that group, right? So in some ways, my ancestors have a bad offside of helping start martial arts, maybe, right? So, and then when we're in Kumamoto, you go into Kumamoto Castle and you're so excited, and then you see up there, Satsuma group came and tried to burn the castle down at a certain time. So, I have to be careful when you say some of this stuff, going, oops. But so that's some of my history on that side of our family side of it, and my grandmother's side, or my grandfather's side, came from Kochi, which is Tosa, which is there's also a lineage of samurai there. And what I kind of like about this, is that when I went back, you're looking to see where your generations are and they took me to gravesite. Here's 13 generations of the Taneda family, right? And so it's kind of neat to go back there. And I think that's also why this is moving into another subject is why I like the historical background within our own style, and O Sensei and Soke and some of the teachings that they learned. So yeah. So, and back to me personally, it was in my last year of high school that I started karate, and I had been doing all kinds of other sports. I was involved in every sport, and I, up to that point, didn't have the coaching that was like it was in the karate, where your knee had to be in this position and your hips were in this position, and all the preciseness of everything you did fixed one thing. All of a sudden there was other things to fix, and that really intrigued me into how the body structure went and that. And I've always been interested in those things going through all the other sports. So when I first started up in the club in Kelowna, different than now. The times are different, how we trained, and it was just a different group. And I know you've had other guests on, and it's been stories about things, and I kind of came from that sort of background as well, with how rough it was, and how you'd start with 40 people and then get down to 3 people after 3 months, and it was sort of like who was going to survive. And they kind of made a joke about it. It wasn't really nice, and in a way, it's made it so that I believe we've created something different in the dojo now. The things that I saw that I didn't like, we definitely, I was moved to change things that I didn't agree with. Mind you, when you're going up, right, you're just trying to survive. You're coming up through the ranks and you're just trying to survive. And so again, a couple things on the personal side is when I started, I was playing soccer for the college, and I had a breakaway with another team, and I thought I could tip the ball around one side of the goalie and go the other way, and he slid in with his cleats, and he clipped my shin, and it broke. And so that's when I was like a yellow belt. And so and then of course, I trained with my cast on, and back in the day, right? You're just being tough, and you had those old knobs on the bottom and that, and trained. But then when I came back, I would say 4 months later, guy put his hand up. I did a roundhouse kick, same place, broke it again. So started off, where you're doing those things as you're coming up, and still hanging in there, and trying to make your place in the dojo. So yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like your body was testing you right from the start, like, are you gonna tough it out, or, how many times do you need to break your leg to get you to quit? Maybe, I guess you kind of talked your body into it, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, here's a funny story, because I was just mentioning in the dojo, someone came in with a cast on just on Friday. So I was saying, oh, remind me, I'll tell you about the dojo story. So we used to line up, and after the class, we'd done all our basics and kata, we'd line up, and then you just trade kumite, right? Just partner up, fight, change. And I get in the lineup. I had my cast on, and one of the guys was, definitely one of the tougher guys. And there's some stories that I can't really repeat about what they did outside of the class. But it was one of the guys, he's a pretty tough guy, but he had a tell. His eyebrows would move up when he's attacking, and it freaked a lot of people out, because they would just go backwards. When we lined up together, I'm a yellow belt, I got a cast on. He's a senior belt to me, and our instructor goes by, and he gives him the old nod, right? Like, I'm gonna, do it. And so he came in, as soon as his eyebrows raised and I saw him coming, I just rocked back on that cast and just kicked as hard as I could, front kick, because, I'm not twisting. I just nailed him right between the legs, and he went down on the ground. Everybody just was laughing at him, right? But that was a survival thing, right? He's going to try to take you out, even if he's got a cast on, it didn't matter. So yeah. So anyways, that's a little sort of a interesting story. And another one, just while we're talking, background wise, when I was a brand new black belt, and we have an orchard, and I was working in the orchard, and back then, it was like you didn't wear masks and you didn't wear protection, you just out there, and I was cutting the grass, so there's like 4-foot blades on the tractor, and I turned around and I got a rock in the eye, and so then I still went in a tournament after that, and then I started losing my vision, and I went to the eye doctor, and it was basically going in, put me on a plane down to Vancouver, and I had a torn retina, so they fixed it. But I thought my sight would come back. I really never got it back. I could only see about maybe 10 inches in front of my one eye, and so my whole competition career has been with one eye. But I never told that story while I was competing, right? I actually, didn't want to give anybody any advantage, but probably having a little bit of a blind spot, but you adapt around those things as well. So lots of my students wouldn't know that story, for instance, that pretty well not being able to see out of one eye in competing. So so everything I've done competitively wise has been with that injury or with that disadvantage, maybe, I don't know. But you take it for what it is, right? You learn.
Yeah, well, you could have wore a patch and made you look even more intimidating.
Well, one time in Australia, you have the bogo on. First match, I hit a guy, and I broke the bones in the hand. And idea is you tape up the good wrist, so they don't know that this is your bad hand, right? So you gotta use their advantage however you can. They don't think you're gonna hit with that one. Well, I didn't take the right wrist, so yeah.
So in the introduction, I gave I guess a brief rundown of who your initial instructors were and so on, but are there any like key instructors or influencers that you want to mention? I know that you spent quite a bit of time with Soke Sensei, and in the early 80s, I think when O Sensei Chitose came to Canada and was traveling across the country, I believe you were accompanying them on those trips. Anyone you feel you may want to mention about your experiences with some of your instructors?
And I want to just sort of preface this a little bit with that. My memories of it are from my point of view. Other people may have seen them differently, and there's a saying, it kind of goes that the shape of the shadow depends on where the light is shining from. So that it depends on your point of view. I'll try to give you my best recollection of some of the things, but if we go back to the beginnings again, when I was a brown belt, the fella that was ahead of me in the club was a black belt, and he was young. He was 19 and I was 21, and we were invited to train with Akutagawa Sensei, and they had brought in Inamoto Sensei and Soke. At the time, we called Soke Waka Sensei, which is like young Sensei.
Yeah.
And we went up there and trained with them, and it kind of blew us away, the knowledge. All the things that I thought, those little mysterious things about karate, when you're up and down the floor, and then all of a sudden these things showed up, and then I went, wow, this is kind of what I always thought was involved in martial arts. So at that point, my instructor had suggested that he would not continue in the dojo, and that he would give it to the decision to the other fellow, which was Brian DeMasters. And so we just saw so many things that we had just never seen before. And we wanted to follow the people from Japan. And then when we came back, and there was a little bit of people weren't interested in the change, the other senior belts that were there, and they kind of talked to the instructor, and he came back in, and we politely got told not to do that around the dojo. So that's when we started up our own dojo back in the day. So it would have been Brian DeMasters and myself, and we were, like I said, young, 19 and 21, and that's when we started. But even before that, when we were in the dojo, I mean, I would be teaching classes when you're an orange belt, right? That's just back in the day, and you were, whoever could do it would do it. So you learned teaching from back then. And then through with my journey with Akutagawa Sensei, just speak shortly on him, I felt that we were very lucky in my career to have the influence of Akutagawa Sensei. To me, the guy was a genius. His bunkai was, he just had such a creative mind, and he was always researching, and you'd think of one thing and he would pull something right out of left field that you wouldn't even have it suspected. And I've been very fortunate to have that throughout my career, to have all those options and all those different bunkai and stuff, coming through. So Akutagawa Sensei, he was a tremendous karateka. Respect the man, and he gave so much. He was just a really, really good karate person. He was good at teaching black belts. I don't think he was very good at teaching white belts or kids. And I say this with all, and admiration for him, but I'd bring him to the class and I'd say, okay, there's a kids class, you have to go in there. Oh, no, I can't teach kids. And he would sit in the truck. He's come from Kitimat. He'd sit in the truck while I went and taught the kids that are expecting him to show up. And then he'd come out when the adults were there. But, if he had black belts, he was like, just unbelievable in his amount of technique. And I'm very thankful for having that as the groundwork that I was able to be brought up with. Now, if I go, I'm going to take you off on another little story, is that when we were first, there's just Brian and myself, and we didn't have a club at that time, and Soke came to Kelowna, and so there's just the two of us. We don't have a dojo. There's just the two of us. And we were training, and I can remember that we went to a Chinese restaurant at the time, and there was a fellow there. I knew him, and he did Kung Fu, and he asked if he could train with us. So we went, okay, well, there's like three of us. We had a set of like wrestling mats, and we don't even know really how to do break falls. We just learned, right? At that point, it wasn't part of our curriculum. So we're just, barely learning it. So we're going around. So Soke at the time, Waka Sensei, he has pads up, and we're doing a break fall, hitting the pads, running off the mat, and we're kind of doing it in a circle. Well, there's three of us. So one guy's going and he's running off, another guy's waiting, and we're going over and doing this. And just remember the fella from the restaurant started to look a little peakish, and he looks over and he just left, and he went and he was out there throwing up, and then there was two of us. Well, it was worse because then you don't have a rest in between, and we're going back and forth around there. So, that's sort of that was the beginning of Soke sort of taking care of myself, and at the time Brian, and there was just two of us. We were kind of like the lone little orphans there, and and back to some of the like when you said about with traveling across Canada. And with O Sensei, I flew up north, and when he went across Canada, and I went with him, of course, not understanding Japanese at all. You're getting little bits, you're watching all the time, right? And how we learned coming up is that we didn't have a sensei where we were, so we would just train something that we knew and train it as much as we could, try to figure it out on our own, and then go to seminars or travel to senseis and try to get that and bring it back and learn it as best we could and figure it out. When we went across with O Sensei, he showed a series called Junichi. You know the series from, it's in the technical manual.
Yeah.
And so as we went across, I got to see it, several occasions. And but I asked Soke, and I said, where did this come from? Have you seen it? He said he hadn't seen it before. So when we got to Toronto, and I know they were still on jet lag time and stuff, and we got to Toronto, and it was the old, I believe it was a bowling alley, what I guess Sensei used to have his first, I think it actually burned or had a fire there or something. Yeah. So I remember being on the outside of where the bowling alley would have been. There's sort of like, there was a ledge there and a fence sort of thing separating. And then I had already gotten out of my gi and was on the sidelines, and I'm not sure. O Sensei wasn't on the floor. I think they probably got him changed to get ready. And then Dimitri Sensei and Haga Sensei and a lot of the senior people I remember them being out on the floor, and they're asking Soke to re-show them the Junichi. And I know he was tired, and he's really shy. His personality is really shy, and so I know he got put on the spot for some of it. And he'd go to get to a technique, and I'd watch him, and I knew that he maybe had misplaced it in his brain, which was which, and he'd look over at me, and I'd kind of give him a little signal, right? Like little, something like that, and he'd go, oh, and then he'd do it. And so this went on like a couple of times during it, maybe about 3 or 4 times, and he'd look over, and then so then Jean-Noel Blanchette, you have the information for Jean-Noel. So Jean-Noel did all the pictures for the technical manuals that you guys have, right? Yeah. And so what would happen is Jean-Noel would send me, sort of ask me, is this what you learned? And then he'd show the pictures and, back and forth. That's what's in the technical manual. So in to be real honest, if you asked me as a test to tell you what the 1 to 12 would, I would fail. If you showed me an individual technique, I could probably give you details that I remember. Once I show that, is it this way, then I'll probably remember details. But if you ask me that, and so, but that was an interesting trip with going across Canada with O Sensei. One of my memories was going in a mall with them and watching O Sensei walk through a mall. I can't remember which city it was, but he was just like I don't know, it looked like he was Winnie the Pooh walking through the mall, looking at stuff, and people literally separated. They moved out of his way. And that's the part that I was watching, right? Because he's just off on his own. I just watched people move out of his way. There's something in how he carried himself that people felt it or knew or something. But yeah, that was kind of a cool thing. So yeah,
it's funny. I interviewed Sensei Brad Jones some months ago, and he told a similar story when he was in Japan. And forgive me if I get the name wrong, but I think he was talking about Nakayama Sensei, and who was just walking down the street, and he said people, even if they didn't even see him, they were just moving around. It was like a wake around him as he was walking down. The way Sensei Jones described it was like his aura was kind of gently nudging people out of the way.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned that as well about O Sensei.
Yeah. He was such a. You would look at him in contradictions. You would look at him and think he's this gentle man, and then you'd see him do something. And go, oh, that looks so dangerous, right? So yeah, and it's another thing that I wanted to say. Is that Canada is. Been very lucky to be influenced by people like Tsuroka Sensei and Haga Sensei, Akutagawa Sensei. These are the people I know because of, within our style. but they all have the generational descendants of O Sensei. And, I had the fortunate of, ability to train with like Inamoto Sensei and Kuguzaki Sensei, Imamura Sensei, Sakamoto Sensei. And they all revere O Sensei, Tsuroka Sensei, all of them, when you hear them talk about them, they have stories, real interesting stories about them, which, and I know I'm carrying off on a subject. You can rein me back in if I get too sideways on this, but O Sensei, this is the story that I've heard sort of through his son and through also being interpreted in that, is that this is probably a famous story, and probably maybe other people have said it as well, but when you go to Japan, the people that have been there, there's a mall. It's called the Shimatori there, and it's sort of like there's a mall. Anyways, it's like a big shopping area, and apparently there was a fight that broke out after the war, and it was from the military, the U.S. military, but they actually weren't allowed to fight. It was against, because it might bring the politics of, the Japanese bringing back in, like it was a disturbance that they were actually not supposed to fight. And I guess O Sensei was there, and he felt, this is the impression that I got from the story, was that he felt that he didn't want other people around to be injured by what these guys are doing, and they're all drinking. And I guess he physically settled the situation down. And the story goes that a few days later, an army truck shows up at his house, and he thought it was going to be, bad because what he had done. And then with the commander, the army guys actually got put in. I don't know what the MPs came for them, so that I don't know what that means in their case. But they were going to be disciplined. The commander asked what had happened, and they found O Sensei, and then they asked him to come and teach on the base. So he taught all of the U.S. soldiers on the base. That became the beginning of maybe the spread of some of that information. So and the stories that I've heard from Soke about that was that he said that an army escort would come to pick him up and then take him to the training. And that actually created a certain amount of status within, the community as well, But these are some of the stories that I heard, that he would get gifts. O Sensei, they would bring him gifts. Like sometimes the gifts would come like chocolate from America, or even I think he got a dog, that was brought over. And these things were, when Soke said that, sometimes they had food and they shared with other people because they were given by the army this sort of thing in I guess in respect for O Sensei. So Soke talked a little bit to me about that, about, how they went through different things. I believe they were living in Kikuchi at the time, and where that was a initiation of bringing the style outside of Japan in a way. But I found it interesting how they were treated and how they got different gifts that that came over from the army that was brought over, and then they were treated differently because he was teaching them in Japan. And then I've also heard crazy war stories from people like Imamura Sensei when they were in the army, and things that they did that you wouldn't teach your students to do those things. But I guess back in the day, they did lots of pretty strong training. Yeah. So one of the things, and I think that it's really important, because like we're talking about things that could be bigger than they are, or whatever. We make it something, but history will be contained by whoever writes it in a sense. And it's interesting because there's a book by John Sells. I don't know if you know, he's sort of a historian down the States, and he has all the different styles of karate and where they come from and backed up. And one of my students bought me this book, and he has all the styles, not just Chito-Ryu, but fortunately for us, Chito-Ryu is in there. And, it sort of talks about all the generations and where they went and where they've come from. And so I talked to Soke about it, and I showed him it, and I said, well, this is, what's being written in this fella's history, right? And I want to know, is this correct? And what do you think about this and that, right? Because again, if you don't say anything, it's going to be whatever's written down. Mm-hmm. So he looked at a picture, and I've seen this picture before, and they're a bunch of kids, and they're in this dojo on the dirt floor, and O Sensei's there, and all these kids, they have hachimakis on and stuff, and they're all in the stance. And he read it, and he says, this can't be the place. This place that it says is somewhere, I don't know, somewhere in Japan, but I thought he said below Tokyo or something. He says, where are the pictures taken? And he points at one little boy, and he says, this is my brother. He's never left Okinawa. So the picture says that it's somewhere in Japan. He says, but it can't be because my brother never left Okinawa. He's still, I don't know if he's passed on, but so again, how I say is it's not the person's fault that they I'm going to say it's been contributed, and that's what the person, whoever told them, but history will be written, and we may be slightly off in that particular case. And he's pointing at the guy going, no, that's my brother. He never left Okinawa. I go, oh boy, that's interesting. And, maybe other things happen that way too. So.
Yeah, I guess technically Okinawa is south of Tokyo, but I don't probably not what it was intended.
Yeah, to. Well, they had the name of the town, and he says no, it can't
the town.
Be there.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he said it can't be in that town. He says because it was So yeah, anyways, a little bit of fun stuff.
Yeah, as somebody who's I've been training Chito-Ryu now for almost 10 years, and I'm a bit of a history nerd myself, as is probably evidenced by this whole thing that I'm doing here now. But yeah, it's the history around O Sensei Chitose. Obviously I'd never met him. He'd passed away when I was maybe 13, and I hadn't even started karate. It was close to 30 years before I started karate after that. But it's really interesting. He was definitely an interesting person. But a lot of mystery kind of around him, kind of surrounded him a bit. A lot of secrecy, mystery. I know that he had his name changed a couple of times. I'm not sure if that was an Okinawan to Japanese kind of cultural thing, because his family name is Chinen, right? Chinen.
Yeah.
And but he changed it to Chitose, and I know that he's related, I think, on his mother's side to Soke Matsumura. I think it's his maternal great-grandfather. I can't remember now exactly, but yeah, lots of a rich martial history for sure that surrounds him, and what he's developed. Obviously I'm biased, like you are. The Ryuha that he created is I don't know if it's completely unique, but it's definitely different from other ones that I have either studied myself or that I've seen. And I'd be curious about your thoughts on, what would you say kind of differentiates Chito-Ryu from other styles of karate that you've, or other martial arts generally that you would have been exposed to?
I want to speak carefully when I say these things, because everybody has their points of views and their belief systems in stuff. I've been very fortunate to be, I believe, under the guidance of like Soke and Akutagawa Sensei, and with the influence of many of the other senseis. I mean, there's one time, I went to Tokyo and trained with Sakamoto Sensei. This is just after he had left, and went and trained with him. But I trained with him in Canada, and he's a really good practitioner, and he put me in positions where it's like you get, when you get Montezuma's Revenge and you get those cold sweats, and that's what my body was in. And if he went further, I thought he was going to break me in two. Yeah. There's been some, great technicians that have come out of that. And what I found is, and this is just from some of my peers when we were training together and on the Canadian team and stuff like that, I didn't feel that they had been given at that time in their careers the amount of bunkai and takedowns and throws and chokes and all those things were not part of their criteria. Not saying that it didn't exist, just at that time. And one of the fellas, I know someone else, I think Ron Fagan mentioned Mike Scales. He's got his own group of Shodan, and he came up to me a few years ago at a tournament, and our girls had done really good in a brown belt division. They kind of dominated quite a large group, and he came up and talked to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I noticed that you guys are still keeping this certain whatever it was." He said attitude about how they're doing it, and I thought, oh, that was interesting, because sometimes you banter back and forth with people from different styles, and we kind of just joke, right? And he came up with really positiveness. And then probably was a couple years later, he said, "I've been going to Okinawa for the last few years," and he goes, "Every dojo I look in looks like you guys, not like the other styles. They all have stances and they're doing motions like you guys, right?" And then he still has his Shotokan group, but I think that we're fortunate in lots of ways with the background of all the knowledge. Now, within saying that, I think that there has been many differences in the cultures between Japan and North America, I'll say, where the information doesn't always flow, and it doesn't flow for lots of different reasons. Mm-hmm. And some of it's a communication. I also believe that I've spent my entire life in karate with a loyalty to Soke, and that in saying that, I've also been able to see things that I've had the privilege to be able to see. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit and go into another subject, because I think it's important. It was important for me. I would never understand why Soke would not correct other people around him for technique, like he might not correct senior people. And there were senior people that were senior to him that would say things, and I go, "Well, that's not what you're showing me. Why won't you say anything?" And this happened lots of years later, was that I was in Japan, and we were taken out of a tournament, myself, and there was Nakayama Sensei, which is another senior person, and Tanaka Sensei, which was a Uchideshi at the time, and myself, and Nai Sensei, who was a university teacher who was underneath of Nakayama Sensei. And the talk was about choke, which I didn't understand. And choke is like a direct line. And so the conversation went that Soke has his choke, which are only a few that he teaches directly to. And he said he doesn't want to interfere with what O Sensei's choke were. So O Sensei's choke might have been like Inamoto Sensei, or Shirai Sensei, or Tashiro, those people in that. And he would never, out of respect for their age and their relationship with O Sensei, to interfere. So he would never correct them. But I didn't understand that I'm going, okay, well, you're teaching this, why don't you just change it, right? Why don't they're not. So, and that also created, I'm going to say, difficulties within the organization where some people are learning some way and some people are learning another, and they're going, this is the way and I watched him stay silent when I wish he would have, maybe voiced technique this way or this way, but it's his personality. So, you accept that, but the information, and I'll say this, I had Soke here and he was going across Canada, and I asked him about a technique and he showed me like 7 different bunkai for this one movement. Mm-hmm. And my memory is not so good. So after he got past about 1 or 2, I'm trying to remember them, never mind trying to see the other ones. So, I get to the 7th one and it's out there somewhere. It's like remembering a phone number. You might get the first 3 and then you lose the other ones. So the next day I asked him the same question. He adds another half a dozen on that weren't the ones that I saw. So now it's even worse. It's like, and so as we went across Canada, we were at a clinic, and a senior belt in our style, I'm going to say he was a Yondan, and he's written a couple of books, and he asked the same question, and I'm all excited because I'm going, now he'll show some, and then I'll remember what they are. Like, it'll remind me of, and he showed one technique. That was it. And it wasn't past. At that point, I realized how much information that was nearly being filtered out depending on how he felt comfortable showing it, right? So, I feel, very fortunate that I've been able to glance at some of those things. I wish I had a better memory so I could retain more of it. But at one point, this is when I, in my sort of junior black belt years, I'm going to say mid-junior black belt years, where he said to me, lots of people come and knock on the door, but not very many people come in. And then he said, you have just stuck your head in the door and looked around. You haven't come in. So it's like, I guess he was saying, I don't really understand the style that much or whatever. But, it's patience. The first gi he gave me, it had an in on, right? Patience, so I guess he's putting me through the tests of that. But fortunately, I've been able to ask and that's again a cultural thing. I bring it up in our dojo. I tell people to ask questions because there's a study that talked about that they said it was like a 4-year-old girl who asked like 300 questions a day, and by junior high, 0, and for all kinds of reasons. So if you get to there, then people are scared to ask that question. They don't want to look stupid. And when I went to Japan, I go with a book, all questions, and then I go to Soke, and he nicknamed me Mr. Question. That was my name, Mr. Question. And I said, well, don't other people ask you? No, I'm going, oh man, like it's the questions don't get rewarded, and I think if you ask a good question, that creates your own evolution. It's like we get somewhere else other than where we are. So questions I think are super important, and every day in my own training, I'm finding it. I'm learning more and more every day about our style and things that just, I guess I wasn't smart enough to pick them up, but you're hopefully that you're not too slow of a learner. There's so many things, and it's like, oh man, just this last weekend, last week I was showing things that I've never shown them that way before, because I don't know that my body understood it quite like that. So yeah, so I've never had a day where I don't go where I appreciate what has been given me as far as information. So when you ask me about what's different within our style, I know that when I went through the grading panel for Karate Canada, that I've had comments from a couple people about, well, we don't have that within our style. We don't have those throws or those curriculum down there. And yeah, and even there, like, you know, I move into another subject is that, you know, the sequence for Juniko, you know? So I asked Soke about that, and what he did was he told me, oh, that wasn't a sequence. It was just, we just trained it at all kinds of these things, which give credit to Higashi Sensei. He packaged them, right? So he got them in a way that people could say, this is a group, practice that, which you know, it's really important. Well, Soke would say, well, we did this and this. So I said, okay, well, what do you want me to show? And so he came up with all kinds of other things, and you're doing a sort of a similar pattern, but then he said, and the breakdowns and the reasons why, and you know, so he went from those positions to saying, oh, well, when we used to train, and I believe he was talking about when him and Sakamoto would train together, right? And that they'd be doing these sort of exercises, and Sensei would just say, do this and do this and do this, and he said we would just do reps of these things, and so that is not necessarily a sequence. It was just things that we did in the training. And, you know, Higashi Sensei was smart enough to put that together and say, okay, here's a group, let's do that. And it's a benefit to all the people that study underneath and get that goodness.
And I think I got where you're going with it. You know, the things that were captured as, you know, Juniko and so on were just snapshots of the many things that were being done.
Yeah, their everyday training was just like whatever O Sensei put out there, and it had them go through, right? And so, I think we're very fortunate to have that in our tradition. And I've seen many things that I'm sure are within the other styles. I don't have the knowledge of the other styles to be able to make that strong comparison.
Yeah.
But when I watch anything and people are doing like jujitsu or throws or takedowns or locks and that, I've been fortunate enough that they belong to part of the curriculums of what we're doing, so that, you know, they're all part of it. So I'm really happy with that part of the system that we have those things, and you know, the depth of that knowledge, I think, is, I'll give you an analogy that I use for my students, is that some of them, my wife had an iPhone 6 for the longest time, and she didn't care. She said, well, I can phone, I can text, I can take pictures. So I don't need anything more. And I'm going, yeah, you know, I want to get her something better. Of course, when she got something that was better, she likes it. But some of my students have, say, for instance, not updated their software. They're still running an iPhone 6, and it still works. It does all the things they need, but it doesn't mean that if they had a better phone, they would have more possibilities. And so I think it's when I think about what the vastness of knowledge that I've been lucky enough to see is that there's so much of it, but it's digging. It's like, you know, your architectural digging, and you're taking off the top layer of sand or whatever, and you see a little horn, and then, you know, you dig more and you see more and more. And I think that that's all part of our growth, is to keep digging, asking the questions, seeing what's there. And I'm finding that if we stop asking the questions, then, you know, our own progress stops. So for me, I feel very fortunate that when I ask questions, there's way more that comes back on those answers than I ever expect. I talked to one of my students this morning that's been living in Japan for the last 20 years. And, you know, I'm sure it was 20 years ago that I told him, ask the same question over, but slightly different. And he's been doing that ever since. And he says, it's amazing. Not always you get 15 different answers for 15 different questions, but even if you get 3 or 4 or 5 that are different, it will go down a rabbit hole that you never even knew about. You would never expect that you were going down there. So, yeah. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about with, you know, our style that, you know, that I'm happy about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a richness within the system for sure. And like you said, it does open you up for the possibility of exploring many different ways of, you know, leveraging one thing into various other things, right? So that's
I've had it where, you know, you're teaching a student and you've seen something and it's not within their reality. And once you show them, it just opens up a whole, it was like coming from one side versus the other side. Like, you know, I'll tell you a story that happened to me in Japan one time. I was in a taxi ride with a senior student and we got in a discussion about something in Shinto, and I was on the sort of the receiving side of that technique doesn't exist. And, you know, back then I'm a little bit brash and, you know, there was lots of people that were in front of us, like there were teams from the US and Australia and Japan. And we were at the back of the dojo. I think it was actually Kuguzak Sensei's dojo. And I'm at the back of the dojo. So I put in the technique that I practice it in Japan with Soke, and we practice, you know, hours of different kicks within the jumps in Shinto, for instance, right? And with different legs and all kinds of stuff. So I don't know, I'm just playing around at the back and I threw it in, right? And the class stops and Kuguzak Sensei's pointing at me. It gets me to come to the front of the class and I have to demonstrate it, but I have to demonstrate it on the person that just told me that it doesn't exist. And but they also have to interpret it to the whole class, how this technique works. So, you know, it's an expansion for all of us, right? It's like it's a learning for all of us. Everything can have two sides to it. Yeah.
This kind of is a good segue to one of my favorite questions I like to ask, which is around little epiphanies or eureka moments that people have throughout their martial arts journeys and so on, where they suddenly realize, oh, that's what that is, or oh, this is what else it could be. Do you have any prominent ones that kind of stick out in your memory of where little lights kind of went on in your head and suddenly you had a better understanding of something or a different understanding of something?
I think that I've been very, again, fortunate, and I'm grateful for it, is that I'm always looking for ways to do things better, like being competitive. I'm always looking for the edge, right? Like, you know, I talked to you before about some of the training methods, you know, that I do, you know, whether it was the hyperbaric chambers or the Fibonacci, you know, training by the Fibonacci numbers, or even using the applied kinesiology and those types of things to get myself prepared for competition. So I'm going to say that it's been like popcorn. I think that I've been very fortunate. It just keeps popping, you know. It won't be when you expect it, but it's continual. Like it's you know, there's always something that shows up, and it's like, why didn't I think about that the day before? You know. So I'm not sure that I have an exact one to tell you. I may remember as we're talking, but I think that it's been a continuum with me, where I've been lucky enough to, something will happen and I'll go, oh, that goes over there, oh, that goes over there, and you're putting something into place that is a connection.
Well, I guess kind of related to the question I just asked about, you know, epiphanies and eureka moments and so on. Maybe this one's a more fair question to ask of you. So you've been involved. You've been training now for nearly 50 years, 46 years or so, if my math is correct, 47 years. How would you say that your approach to training and teaching has evolved over that time? Like you were saying before, you know, when when you were going up through, the Q belt ranks and getting ready for your Shodan and so on, you didn't, maybe if I understood you correctly, you'd indicated that, you hadn't had any exposure to, the different joint locks and throws and things of that nature. So the more knowledge that you gained, I guess, about the system, how did your approach to training and teaching maybe change from when you were Shodan up to now?
We used to train, I would say, a lot tougher. We used to do things, and some of it was a lack of knowledge. But I do think that I've done my best to follow as much of the sort of sports medicine along the way. I was very fortunate to have a cousin who was a naturopath and a chiropractor, and back in the 70s, they were doing some of this applied kinesiology and when it was first coming out. And so I have been experimented on all kinds of ways for body health, had all kinds of things done to me. And I've always looked in those directions to better our training methods. So, I remember back when I was training for some of the tournaments, I'm going to say back in the 80s, we had these strength shoes, and I've never seen anyone with them. Even I've never seen them before. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like a running shoe, and they've got a platform, like a platform on them. And so you do plyometric and stuff with that. And we were doing that back in the 80s, right? And even if you have those shoes on, and I still have them, if you walk around with them, they hurt because it's like you get a calf workout on it. Never mind if you're doing plyometrics on them. And I remember taking those, and my wife and me, we had them, and we went down to Mexico, and we're running along the beach, and people are looking at you like you're, like goofy, because, and honestly, I've never ever seen anybody else use those type of shoes. They came out of basketball. I think that's where, I originally saw them, but we've always tried to do crossover stuff. So, the training definitely is smarter now for us, how we're doing it. I believe there's still value in a strong, hard workout. I think that you have to push the parameters of where people are physically to get them to be able to push mentally. I think those two combine, and that without it, people will not get strong mental muscles. So they need that extra push-up to do the extra push-up in their mental capacity. So I think that's some of the stuff. But I know I'm deviating from your subject slightly, but we have a microwave and it was upstairs, and trying to get rid of that. And so I said, well, let's put it downstairs. It's a flight of stairs, but let's put it downstairs just in case we need to warm something up. Well, it's amazing how many times you need to warm things up. So now, if I warm this tea up, you run down the stairs and put it in there. But if it's warming up for a minute, you got a minute of doing nothing. So I used to do push-ups all the time. So I'd be doing up and downstairs, and I'd do push-ups, and it's like you're filling that gap where you wouldn't be doing anything with something. So so I think that we've like I know since pandemic we haven't been doing these sorts of things, but how, I'm not sure if you guys do like ladder training, where you have the ladders on the ground and you do the footwork in it. Well, we do them on benches. So what happens is it supercharges that whole workout. So you're up and down the benches doing the same workout that you would do on the ladder training. Well, I've never seen anybody do that, but we've done it in our dojos. So they just think it's normal to do that, and maybe other people are doing, but I've never seen that before. So it's like you're trying to follow that edge. I believe that sports and sports science has evolved medicine and evolved, thinking, because if you have a Wayne Gretzky and he's got an injury, you want to get him back out on the court there, not because he's the most strongest physical specimen, but it's because of what he has, up here. And so I think sports medicine has changed to get people in the game sooner. If you're going to pay them, $20 million a year, you better have them out on the floor, right? So I think that that's a good thing with sports. And that's, I think, taken me into areas for, I know we talked about this before, but I think that learning and kumite and fly fishing, they're all the same subject, and that in kumite, people do things, they do them in habits. And that's when you're fly fishing the fish, you find out what they're doing and how they're feeding or those types of things. And if you can, at least for the fly fishing that I do, and you're figuring out habits. And sometimes people will not move out of their thinking. And that's that thing about, oh, I have my favorite fly. Well, if they don't move out of that thinking, it might not be the right fly for that day. The temperature of the water might be different. The fish may be feeding in a different area. The current might be different. There's so many factors, the time of the year, that mean that if you're not adaptable, then your success rate won't be there. And I believe that that's very similar to the way that people learn things is the way that they also do kumite. So if you can figure out that, it's a very similar subject. So yeah, so I could have gone into that area about, with learning and taken courses in like NLP, which is, not sure if you know, like a neuro-linguistic programming. If you want to follow that back, Anthony Robbins sort of took that to a different level. People know who Anthony Robbins is, so he kind of took that up and in his first few books. But with the neuro-linguistic programming, for instance, the two people that started it was Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And we took courses from Michael Grinder, which was John Grinder's brother. And in some of those, for the neuro-linguistic programming, sort of like on the 5 sensing. So other people talk about it in different things about us learning, and like from visually or, auditory or kinesthetic. Those are the 3 major ones. But there's other areas to NLP that are being able to read body language and to mirror and to pace and those types of things. Those things that all come right into kumite. It'd be like someone that's driving along a road and someone comes up beside them, but not really fast, but just a little faster. And all of a sudden, both cars are going faster, that's like pacing, making a report. All of a sudden, you don't realize you're going faster. Well, that guy was just going a little faster, and all of a sudden, you are too. These things can all be taken and put into schemes for kumite. There's things in NLP that are like pattern interrupt. Those types of things are, it's like, I'm going to say this way, and I fool around with the children in this, you show them card tricks. Well, if you show a card trick and they don't know what you're doing, you can just keep doing it over and over. Not any different than scoring on somebody in kumite, right? If they don't understand what you're doing and the brain hasn't calculated it. And that's why even with, I'm going to say for kumite, if you take shortcuts that make the person believe that you've gone the full route, then you can actually change the timing. And I see this crossover, like for instance, in basketball. I'm a real basketball fan, but I watch the way that they're handling things, and people are, the skill level in sports are changing. There's people that will change the parameters of how people think. There's people like Steve Nash and Wayne Gretzky, Tiger Woods, right now Stephon Curry, right? All those people are changing what people now think about the sport. So, they're going out and doing things different. I think somebody that we had, seminars with was Tiki Donovan. When Tiki Donovan came over, he was a British coach. When he came over, some of the things he was showing was way different than we had any knowledge of. And of course, Great Britain back then were just dominating the scene. They were winning all the championships. And I remember the first World Championships I went to in Australia. I watched the British team beat the Japan team 5-0 and handily. every one of those Japanese competitors were Japanese national champions. And the British came in. There was one guy, he went up and he scissor kicked with his legs, the guy, took the guy down and axe kicked him. I'm going, oh man, who has the, kazumbas to do something like that? But back then, they were using an iPhone 12. We were still using iPhone 1s or something, right? So as sports change, I think we need to change along with it and with the way that we teach the information.
Throughout your, I guess, nearly 5 decades experience and so on, is there a favorite or maybe a most important concept that you have sort of absorbed and adopted that affects how you teach or how you train yourself?
Well, like one of the things is that I competed into my early 40s. I was on the teams in those times, and I always wanted to lead by example. So there's lots of times that I had more to lose than the people I'm competing against. I mean, I competed in the nationals against my own students, right? That I'd brought up since they were 10 years old, and now we're competing at the nationals against each other. And so I have, lots to lose, more than them. They have lots to gain, right? But I always wanted to lead from the front. And I think that's important. There's a rule in the dojo that if I can't do it, no one has to do it. So sometimes I get an injury. I guess you guys don't have to do it on that side of your leg because I can't do it, right? So I always wanted to have that in there. And I believe that because I'm always searching and I'm always looking for how to better myself and to better the techniques, that's an expression that goes back into the students. And I hope that they will look for it as well. But I don't know if you read, I have something online there. It's called Watering Children. And I have to be mindful of that too. But yeah. So anyways, there's something that I wrote there. It's called Watering Children. And it's something that I think applies somewhat to the generations of parents out there right now. And what I did was, when my father was alive, we went to a seminar at a local like a greenway, where they have plants and those types of things. And they had a seminar, and it was kind of bit before Christmas. And what the guy was saying was that most people, they kill their house plants because they overwater them. So what happens is they bring this nice house plant home, and then they water it, and then they want to give it so much, and then they water it again. Pretty soon they're drowning it, and the roots are actually getting rotten. And so of course the leaves start going brown. Well, they water it more, and then okay, that plant's got to go, right? And I went to myself there. I went, oh, that's a little bit like some parents are with their kids. They give them too much, and then they don't let their. And what he said was that the poinsettias, when they, after Christmas and they're not sold, they put them to the side so they don't take as good care of them. He says that's when they get the best, they get the brightest after that. And I think that stress, and it's the same with grapes, and that, they need a bit of that stress to make them right for the wine. And I think that we're the same way. I think that there needs to be that part of it within the teaching as well. So yeah, if you look, you'll see it on our website. It's somewhere there. It's called Watering Children.
What are your thoughts on sport karate and Olympic karate? Given that the Olympics is the pinnacle, if you will, of athletics. Knowing that it's not necessarily going to be in the next Olympics, but it may be back again in the future. Any thoughts on sport karate and its place in the continuum of self-protection to self-perfection?
Yeah. In my career, it was, when you're a young person coming up, it's your dream to be in the Olympics and represent your country and that sort of thing. And I think there's a real pride to be able to put on the Canadian colors and to represent your country. And I think that the Olympics supply that venue where it's not just a one sport activity, but all the sports are there. So you're part of a bigger situation. Then you have to put your sport in, and it has to be viewed in a way that's acceptable by the Olympic Committee. And I think that karate has moved their rules around all over the place to try to fit what the Olympic Committee will think as acceptable. So, you're not the same as the Taekwondo, and you're not the same as, other things, or boxing or that, there's different rules. So within those rules, you have to make it something that's distinct and represents what we're doing. I think it's a good thing visually for people to see what we're doing. I think that they did a good job of, even with the video replay, and the announcers, you'd see, and they'd show something, go, okay, that was off target. And you'd think, oh, that was so, was it? And then they show it, and yeah, it was, so, good on the referees and that sort of thing. I think it came out like a good product, but I know that it's come up in other conversations, but I watched just a clip, because I don't watch Joe Rogan, but he had a clip on about when the one guy got knocked out, right? And he's kind of going, oh, well, this is the loser and this is a winner, and the winner's on the ground and the loser is, and they kind of mocked it a bit. And I think that because it came from a media that's so strong, like widespread, that probably wasn't a good thing. But in my opinion, I think that their comments were coming fairly shallow. And the reason why I say that is because if you were in the MMA and you kicked the guy in the nuts, and he went down, you probably, it wouldn't be a good thing, right? I don't know what the rules are, but I mean, for instance, somebody's going to put a choke on you and you bit them, they probably wouldn't care for that. Or like, why do they tell them to not put their toes in the cage? Like if you take the logic forward and say, oh, well, it wouldn't matter in a real fight if you kicked them, where in the privates, or you bit them, or you poked them in the eyes, it would be all part of defending yourself. So I think what happens is we have to take it in the parameters of the rules and make the rules so that they give the product that will look best for us. Like one of the things that I don't care for is that they've taken out the grabbing part. But I understood when they had the grabbing, that it looked kind of like sloppy. But one of the parts when they were allowed to grab, there was just some crazy good takedowns. And I think it made our martial art look good. Yeah. But what they had to do, they had to eliminate that so it wouldn't look like they're just yanking it. So what they've done is, oh, you can't grab. So they're in there face to face doing one of these shaking things so that they don't get called. That to me is a bad thing for our sport, because it looks silly to anybody else that doesn't understand. So the rules have steered the direction of where our sport has gone to. And I'm not saying good or bad, because I love competition. I think competition makes people improve. If you put a kid up and they're practicing at the back of the dojo, you put them in front of a video camera or in the ring or out in front of everybody, they rise in a different level of so it's helpful for us to have competition. Mm-hmm. We have to understand that the rules are there to represent something, and we're doing it. I mean, if you go back, all your guests probably have said, oh, when the rules back in the day when we were there, and that was the same thing. No weight divisions, barely any padding on your gloves, and you just wipe the blood off on the other guy, and those were the way it was. But we can't have those things nowadays. It's a different sport. So my ideas about the Olympics, I think I love the ideas of the Olympics. I hope that we can define our sport in a way that it has a proper viewing pleasure for people, especially outside of the people that already know our sport. If people outside are looking, well, why are they chest to chest going like this? That doesn't help our sport, you know. And they see people grabbed and thrown down and taken down. That looks like it's got something to it. I love that, right? And people will always go to what the referees will call. So whatever the referees are going to call that, those referees can say, oh, we're going to call this now, and the competitors will move towards that. So it's dictated by what the referees are going to do. So yeah, that's my thought about the Olympics, and I want them in there. I think Olympics is a good thing. I was really proud that our sport is in there, and I hope that people got views of it and thought that it's a good thing. I just hope it doesn't change us into being something other.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the criticism about it comes from. Like, I've heard both sides, obviously. You know, there's people have different opinions. Some people think it's the greatest thing. It's the biggest platform in the world. It's a way to introduce it to the world, you know, that kind of stuff. But then you have, you know, I don't want to call them purists, but, you know, people that are more, because I would probably categorize myself into this category, people that are more attached to what the original intent was for the activity. You know, it wasn't a sport, it was something else. And like you know, competition is good. But, you know, have seen, some people have said they've seen, and I'm not educated in this at all, but judo over the years since it was introduced into the Olympics has really changed, because it's much more now competition centric, like you said, doing what the judges will call and give points for and reward you for, as opposed to it being I don't know if judo was ever a martial art, but it was derived from jiu-jitsu, which is a martial art. And so it's moved away from the original intent, you know, of defending yourself as in favor of, you know, scoring points. And Taekwondo is a similar thing, right? So I don't know where personally I land on the whole thing. I like you was proud that karate was in the Olympics, and I was proud that you know, there was a Canadian that was competing as well. Daniel Gasinski was, I thought he represented himself and the country really, really well. But yeah, it's to people that don't know and don't understand the rules. And I'm not up on everything WKF either. But you know, to me, it looked like the person who got kicked in the head and collapsed and won, it kind of looked like he moved himself into danger. And competitions that I've been in, if you do that, you get penalized, not the person that hits you, right? Yeah. But that's different rules, different platform, different thing. But no, I appreciate your insights on that. I think that was it's a discussion that will rage for a while. I think.
Getting ahead of you probably on certain things, but I brought up the idea in our dojo a couple weeks ago about cultural appropriation. And what I did was I said, are we doing that? Because our dojo, we do lots of that stuff. And it was really, in my amazement, I had 3 younger girls, I would say 12, maybe 13 and 14, that hardly say much to me in class. Like I'm saying, I probably haven't heard a sentence from them in the whole many years that they've trained with me. They'll say yes or no, but there's never really a complete sentence, I don't think. And they put up their hands multiple times to pitch in on the subject. And I'm talking in an adult class. They're in an adult class, and there's, you know, lots of adults there. And these young girls added into how much they felt that the depth of knowledge that they're learning in other ways, how important that is to them. And one of the young ones said that when they say about karate to their friends, they stop doing it because it's all about punching and kicking. And they said, but it's hard for them to explain that it's more than that. They're learning all these other things, right? So yeah. So anyways, I kind of drifted off there for you.
No, that's great. Yeah, I have that as one of my questions that I normally ask. I was debating whether I ask it of you, but now that you brought it up, what? How did that discussion go? I'm curious.
I was totally blown away because everyone in there, they want that part of it. And we probably do more than other dojos, I would say. We wash the floors and we bow when we come in. There's actually a standing bow and then a kneeling bow, and then we will bow to the instructors. And there's lots of that goes on. But what I find is that in the beginning, it's weird for people in our culture, right? Because it's not normal. But if you go to Japan, you will see people on the phone in their own houses with no one else around, and they're bowing when they're on the phone. And you'll see them when they're driving. They'll be beeping at people and bowing, as they're driving, and it's part of their culture. But it's a way of communicating, and it's inbred in them. You'll see them, right away. It's their body language. And what I find is the people that are with us long enough and understand it, that it's actually a human connection between two people. So when we do the bowing, it's like there's certain people in our dojo I never consider. I stop dead and, we acknowledge each other, and it's different than, passing by someone and say, hi, how's it going? And keep walking, right? It's this, we actually make a body stop and you communicate it. And I got my, I've learned so many things by not being a good student, I guess. But I remember the first time I seen O Sensei, everybody's got their head down, and I was never taught, so nobody taught me. And I'm come up, and it's just O Sensei, me looking at each other, right? I'm going, okay, everybody else's head's still down there, but that was sort of like, oh man, what are you doing, right? It's like but I didn't know. No one taught me that. I didn't understand that was a matter of respect. As soon as I was up there and I'm just O Sensei, me looking at each other, it wasn't a good feeling. He's probably, wondering. Yeah. But so, I think that all those things, and we use, I'm a little bit contrary on using all the Japanese terminology. And I do a bit, but it's not part of people's grading, or I don't do it all class long, because I find that if people understand from me that this is a rising block and this is how you do it. I've watched people in their classes use the wording and say, they'll go, ageke. Well, it takes so long to say it that that's how fast people are doing it. So if they understand it's and they're going, then you get that body response quicker from them. So I've probably in some ways moved away from that.
So here's a question I like to try and ask as many people as possible. And it is about, what does a Shodan rank mean to you? And the follow-up to that, or the not follow-up, but the addition to that would be, should there be a minimum age to receive that rank, in your opinion?
I think that's probably a good one for debate. I think it depends on the dojo. I think it depends on how the instructor feels for certain things in their own systems. For us, or for myself, I think that there needs to be some maturity, so that it's not only your technique, but a black belt way of thinking. So to me, that is not always has to do with age. You have some pretty mature younger ones. As we go through, you'll get impressions of where they're coming from, but then I hate to see someone go through and be technically very good, but not have the ability to steer the car, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on that individual. I personally, we haven't done lots of gradings that are, well, I don't know if we've done any that are under 16 within our own dojo. I'm going to say if they were in real danger, where would their thought process go under a stressful situation or under a pressure situation? To me, that might be part of having a black belt, is what you would do. And I know lots of people will go through gradings and they're really putting them through that grinder to see if they get that right of way to go through. So to me personally, I would say that the black belt holds something, but I don't, and I've heard other people say this too, I really dislike it when people get to their Shodan level and that's the pinnacle of their existence.
One of my favorite answers that I got to this was from Sensei Gary Legacy. And I actually interviewed him with one of his senior students, Randy Dauphin, Sensei Dauphin. And I asked him that question, and Sensei Dauphin talked about what the process was. You know, you do this, you do that, you have to do all the katas, you do fighting, you do, you know, all these things, right? The actual physical test. And I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but what Hanchi Legacy said was that it's you're walking from the hallway into the big room where you can see everything. You're suddenly in this room where all these possibilities live.
Yeah.
And you know, until you get that Shodan, you know how to get to the room, but you don't know what's inside the room.
Yeah.
And so I really like that analogy, and I've used it a lot actually with the people that I'm instructing and so on. It's like, you're in the big room now, you know. You can afford to play, you can afford to you're expected to experiment and test things on yourself and try to enrich your understanding of why it's this and not that, you know, or things of that nature. So yeah, well, I'm always interested in other people's thoughts on what it is. You know, is it a rite of passage? Is it just another thing that you collect through life? Is it something that really means a lot, and it's a, like you said, a pinnacle, or is it the beginning?
Yeah,
and there's.
I think that it is significant for people, but it's significant in the way that it's just one more step on your journey. And you know, the next day you're not different than you were the day before. It's all those hours that you put in to get there, and you know, you're still the same person who you were. And I think, you know, I'll you know, segue off into another sort of silly story, but it's like that I've been introduced. There's been people that have come up to me and say, "Hello, my name is so and so, and I'm a, you know, Nidan here, and I've got this and this and this." They'll give me their credentials, and then I'll go, "Hi, I'm Chris," you know, and that's kind of, I think the credentials behind, you're going to see it on the floor, whether people wear what they can do or what they can't do.
You know, if you're looking back over the 46, 47 years or so that you've been involved in karate in particular, is there anything, if you could do it over again, is there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one for anyone that has to answer that, because, you know, you get to where you are by all the experiences that you've had. I for sure would have liked to buy Apple and some of those other things earlier. But yeah, you know, if you had to look at it, and I think one other thing that I may have considered is how we ran the dojo, in the sense of, like, I still go to communities. So those communities that we went to, and there's many times people say, "Oh, why don't you have your own dojo?" But I found that geographically, I would go to the people, and that became, that group would come there. And it might be somebody that says, "Oh, it's just closer." So I had always thought back and thought, what would have happened if we would have created, one location and had it going. But I probably, wouldn't even change that because of the people that we have throughout the valley, that I go and teach. I'm not sure. I probably would have, but you learn your lessons from it. I would have been a little bit more patient in my questions. I would have structured my questions with a little bit more patience and a little bit more. I think that I was younger. I was so enthusiastic that I wanted all those things that maybe being older, I would look back and go, maybe you just went in there like a bull in a china cabinet, and you should have just went in there and looked around a little bit first and then asked. So some of those things, I guess I wish I would have been able to have some more experience with some of the higher ranking senseis that I would have made time for. And if I would have had the knowledge I have now, then maybe I would have switched that up. There's a fella, Shirai Sensei, and we're pretty close, but he would always be at Soke's side, and he was one of the senseis that didn't go to war because I forget, he had some sort of illness or something that he couldn't go to war, so he was still there during the war with Soke when some of the other senior belts had to go off. And Shirai Sensei, he knew these string techniques where he'd do things with strings, and that's just a practice. They actually have like a wire that is like a piano wire type of thing. And he apparently knew like 800 techniques and variations, so wherever that takes you, right? And there's 3 people that I know of that have at least notes on some of it. One is one of my students. He figures he has notes up to about maybe close to 200. And then there's Tanaka Sensei, that used to be the Uchideshi, and he apparently had more, like maybe 250. And then there was one other fellow. So he really only spent time showing the 3 people. But I also believe he spent time showing, we are calling Soke's son Sodai now. So we use Sodai. So he also has trained with Shirai Sensei, and I think done some of it. I'm not sure how much, but I haven't seen any of it. I know a couple of my other students, he showed a few little things, but that is I'm going to say an art that I don't know lots of people that have the knowledge in there. And I want to spend time with my own student to have him, give me some, some of the notes and stuff like that. And so there's certain senseis I wish I would have put that extra time in. I know Inamoto Sensei, he offered me when I was in Kumamoto one time to do the kama kata, and he was doing a kata in the dojo, and he said, it will be my present to give it to you. And we just never had the time to do it. There's other senseis like Sakamoto Sensei, incredible amount of knowledge. All of these senseis that have those that knowledge that I hope. Kato Sensei was another one in Japan, and he had lots of knowledge. Just to gather some of that and make sure that your own library has some of their information in. So that would probably be it. Having some of those experiences and maybe having a bit more. I know that when I said that I met that Kuniba Sensei in Las Vegas, same thing, and just a tremendous amount of knowledge, and getting some of that. And like now, you see lots of stuff on the internet, and people put all kinds of different ideas out there. again, I feel fortunate. Anything I watch, I go, oh, that fits right in here with what we're doing. Oh, that fits in here. And we've been very fortunate that all those things are part of what we do within our style. I know that I was training with the first time at O Sensei, and we were way up north, and there was a fella there he was a Nidan from another style, and I think he did Aikido, and we were doing throws and that, and he said to one of the other senseis, oh, that looks like Aikido. And they told him to not say it too loud because O Sensei didn't like that. He thought maybe they stole some stuff from him. I don't know. I don't know those back history stuff of all those guys, but, I just remember them telling them, don't say that in front of O Sensei. He'll get really mad. So, yeah. So I wish that, and the other thing, if I'm going to say, is I wish I would have been able to understand Japanese so that I could have gotten some of the information differently. I know, luckily, what my student is quite fluent there, and has spent lots of time with Soke. And at one clinic, someone was interpreting, and they said a certain direction. He came up to me afterwards. He said, when he was saying that was front, Soke didn't mean that was front. He meant this was front. So, I mean, that's a big change in an interpretation, right? So I think that having the knowledge, the language was something that if I were to have to do it again, that I would go back there just so that I would be more privy to it. Yeah, well, I find for myself is that it's exciting every day because you're uncovering other things. And, like one of the analogies that goes along with what we're saying is that when people are looking at a tree, they don't realize they're only looking at half of it, that half of it's under the ground, and that part that's invisible, not visible to us, how important that is. And I would analogize that to the roots of our style, and your roots and the different things that come out from it. All of a sudden we get these gifts that show up,
Yeah. So speaking of our style, as you referred to it, in Canada, Chito-Ryu is a bit of an anomaly as compared to elsewhere in the world. Like in Canada, it's one of the major styles. Typically through WKF, I think there's 4 major styles: Shodan, Goju, Wado, and Shito. And in Canada, there's those 4, obviously, but Chito-Ryu is also one of the main styles. And that's obviously for, as a result, of the influence of Tsuroka Sensei. And when he brought, karate into Canada, or started proliferating it. Do you have any thoughts on why do you think Chito-Ryu never really evolved as a major style outside of Canada? Like even in Japan, it's a regional style, mainly in the southern Kumamoto area, but it never really gained a lot of widespread popularity, I guess, and that's despite the role that O Sensei played in introducing karate to the mainland, first of all, back in the 20s, and then the lead role he played in developing the first organizations that were founded in Japan. So I find it a little curious that Chito-Ryu didn't really become more popularized, I guess, as compared to some of the others. Any thoughts on why that is?
We have so many different organizations that still exist, that are within our style, but in North America, with Dimitri Sensei's group and people that have branched off, and with Sakamoto Sensei's group, Hagashi Sensei's group, there's all these different groups that have taken their own stride in their own ways. I think that there's something that has been held back within our style that it's not to popularize it for financial reasons, that's for sure. That's part of it. But I think that there was always this secrecy about things, and that, you know, it was back to the martial arts. So you had to prove yourself to get that information. And then that, you know, it wasn't easily gotten. And I've kind of lived that with my career, right? You know, you're working a lot to get that, and all of a sudden things show up. But I think that there's a crossover between that and people needing a criteria that's in a format. I would say that Hagase Sensei is probably quite good at doing that, right? Like putting it in packaging it, and that this is. But I find when I'm talking with Soke, or in the case before with some of the other higher senseis, that it was a not packaged so much. There was a lot of knowledge that was like a big field with a bunch of animals running around. It wasn't in a corral that was very small that people could say count them, right? So there was that knowledge that was out there. And the other thing, and this came from one of my peers, Kaz Hashimoto, and Kaz was like Canadian champion about 5 times and produced Canadian champions, and I think 2 of his students are top 10 or top 8 in the world for kata right now, and anyways, we talked a little bit, and he was saying that with our basai, which is different than the other basais, and it looks different, and he said, oh, that looks like Tamari basai. And then he said to me, he says, well, if you look at, you know, Shiri and Naha and Tamari is a little ways away, he said they were very secretive. They didn't like to give their information out. And I went, oh, that sounds like our style, right? It's like they're so stingy. And so I'm not sure whether or not 2 of those things happen. I know that there have been times when I have seen things changed, and where Soke, or mainly Soke, someone will do something a certain way, or he may have been shown them a certain way, and he'll go, oh, that's good. And then he'll show somebody else a slightly different way, and then, oh, that's good. But if those 2 people get together, they're going, well, what's this way? And no, it's this way. And so there's a contradiction in that, but he may have been teaching them for what their levels were. And so maybe that fit them and their body type or their level of thinking or that, right? So you might get differences. So all of a sudden that can create politics. You know, and I'll go back to someone that we talked about earlier in our talk before, and there was someone that had a book, and it was on bow techniques, and they said to me, well, what do you think about this? And I looked through it, and I go, well, it's nice what you've done, but I said, I see some errors in there. And he says, what do you mean? He says, Soke said it was good. And I go, yeah, but did you ask him if it was accurate? Because it's different, right? Because Japanese person is not going to tell you, oh, you know, it's wrong. They're pretty well going to say, well, nice effort, good job, way to go, right? And so this person, he had actually technical errors in the book, and that same person actually said to me, well, how come you guys do a hand technique that's like this instead of like this? And I said to him, you know that book you got at O Sensei's? Can you pull it out? And he says, what's O Sensei doing? Oh, he's doing like what you're doing. And so we didn't change it. We're doing the same thing that O Sensei was doing, right? So it has its own evolutions for whatever the instructor has in their brain. But yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, so, you know, maybe, I guess what I'm hearing, if I can paraphrase, is probably a function of, you know, the reason why there's, I wouldn't say secrecy around Chito-Ryu, because I don't think it was intentionally held back, but it sounds like it was maybe a function of O Sensei's personality. To an extent, he wasn't about, you know, singing from the rooftops a little, you know. I don't know if, and I'm not trying to imply that other styles have done that, but the other styles, you know, the big ones seem to have taken more of a business approach. You know, you brought up, I can't remember if it was on while we were recording or previous to it, but you brought up Demura Sensei, Shito-Ryu. And I believe he was sponsored, like he was sent over from Japan to help spread the word. And I think other styles have done something similar.
Yeah.
But that didn't really happen so much, at least not as purposefully as you know, with Chito-Ryu as with other styles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they missed the boat on doing that for sure. But I heard something, and I don't know, it's back in those hearsay rumor days or whatever, but I heard a story one time that O Sensei didn't like what someone was doing in somewhere in Japan. I thought it was in the Tokyo area, and he just says, okay, see you later. And he cut 1,500 people in a phone call. So it's like, I guess he wasn't concerned about any financialness in there, but you know, again, I don't know that validity of that. I just remember hearing that sort of story. It's like, yeah, O Sensei just went, see you later, you know, 1,500 people. So I don't know. I think he probably had his own personality for what he thought he felt was a certain thing. And yeah, I don't think it had to do with financial rewards. I think it had to do with something else. And so, yeah, I'm not certain. I know that I heard, you know, with Brad Jones say something about having a personality base versus a system base in your dojo, and I think that's maybe part of it too. And that's why, again, give credits to Hagashi Sensei. You know, he packaged stuff up. You know, he put it in sequences, and you know, of course, they have them in Japan as well. But I think that you're catering to a different kind of audience. You know, like we're when you talk about that cultural appropriation, and it's like we are bringing some of that in, and there are things that when they come in here, we work within those parameters. To me, they're the guardians of the guardians of some of that knowledge. And you know, when I'm Soke didn't like me using this type of wording. I probably got it, you know, translated however it got translated, but I always think that sometimes we're trying to preserve a living antique. I think they don't think that antiques, it didn't work with the languaging, but, you know, I'm thinking, well, you know, in some ways we're trying to preserve that living, it's a living antique, right? It has growth, but there's something in it that has this historical essence that we're still trying to, you know, hold that together. So.
Well, I could keep chatting with you for hours on end. especially about you know, your stories of your experiences with, you know, Soke as well as O Sensei, obviously, and some of the other names who I've met Kugizaki Sensei briefly several years ago. He came to Toronto, but I've not met Inamoto Sensei. I've not met some of the others that you've mentioned, but I've, you know, heard stories of them and seen you know, seen some grainy old videos of them doing things, and so yeah, so I, you know, I'm really pleased that you agreed to come on and share some of your experiences and your thoughts and everything, you know, throughout your karate career. Is there anything before we end? Is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't?
I guess. Well, something came to my brain was that, you know, as my training evolves and I'm recognizing things that I never recognized before, I think that I'll use that. There's an analogy about, you know, a couple of young fish swimming up the river, and they meet an older fish, and the older fish says, nice temperature of the water is really nice, isn't it? And they go, yeah, and they keep swimming, and one of the younger ones look to the other and goes, well, what's water? You know, and I think that is something that happens when we don't understand certain things, and it can be within any style. And if people get locked into a place where, you know, this is just only one thing, and then it doesn't open the other possibilities. I hit I just bought a vehicle, and I hit a bear coming home from class, took out the front end, one corner, and it was a big bear. Yeah, I was so mad that I didn't see it. You know, it was getting dusk, kind of a little bit dark, and I just didn't see it. The first thing I went out and I got brighter headlights. And then I thought, that's happens a lot in management and in the dojo, is that you expect people to do something, but their lights don't go far enough, so they don't see it. And so I believe that the more that we learn, then your vision goes further, so that you do see things that your students don't see, or in cases, sometimes senior people don't see either, right? Because we get blind to it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's always importance for us to keep searching and keep asking questions. I think that, you know, there isn't there a saying that goes something like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I think that there's lots of my students have lots of knowledge, more than me in other areas, but we work together, and I have certain expertise that they don't have, and you work together and you build it up, and you're in that search together. So yeah, I think that when for me, karate has really fulfilled so many things. When I was just starting, I think I was a brown belt. I went to a mind awareness course, and you write down all the things on one side that you're good at and all the things you want on the other side, and then you draw lines. Mine, you know, travel, money, blah, 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 blah. Mine went karate to all of them. And that's what's happened in my life, right? You know, it's allowed us to travel. It's allowed us, you know, financial and all those things. So, and it's allowed us relationships that we would have never had before. So yeah, it's all good. It allowed me to be able to talk with you.
Yeah, and likewise, vice versa. You know, I like to joke that and I'm half joking that, you know, karate keeps me out of jail because, you know, it's a way to vent, you know, just the frustrations of daily life, and to do something physical as well as, you know, intellectually challenging in that. But you know, I think you've nailed it there, is that, you know, the real opportunities are the people you meet and the experiences that you have, and that kind of thing. And you know, I would count today in that as well, for my own experiences. I really appreciated speaking with you and getting to know you a little, and you know, really grateful for you agreeing to participate in this podcast today.
Well, it was my pleasure, and yeah, I was looking forward to meeting you. I know you're doing a great job. You know that you're the Oprah of the Karate Canada, right?
I wouldn't go that far at all, but there are others actually that are doing similar things that I would recommend you check out. I mentioned Hanshi Gary Legacy in the past previously, and some of his within his orbit, I guess, they put together a similar podcast kind of thing. Is called Punch, Kick, Choke, Chat. And it's great. It's great. They've done some. We've had some overlap in terms of people that we've had on, but they've had on some really interesting people and had some really interesting conversations. So I would recommend to you and anybody who's listening to check them out as well.
Well, I have to say this. There were people that I know, and I know them quite well, and I was fascinated by their personal stories. You know, like some of their stuff. Like, I don't, you know, people like Norma, and, you know, I like hearing what Peter Giffen and Earl Roberts and yeah, David and Teresa Griffin, and yeah, I really enjoyed to learn more about them. You know, sometimes when you're in a conversation, it's going back and forth, and you go all over the place. But when you get to listen to their stories, it's quite quite insightful. So thank you for doing this, and I hope that, you know, I wasn't too goofy in some of the answers, but
no, we're goofiness is appreciated here. It's not to worry at all. No, it was great, and I really genuinely appreciate your time. So thank you very
Thank you.
much.